I'm Jake. I'm an alcoholic. Yeah, thanks for asking me to come out here and do the Zoom thing. Yeah, I'm Jake. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is 10/10/20. It's not my first sobriety date. It's just my current one. Hopefully my last one. Um, but I do this a day at a time, just because that's the reality of this stuff. I don't know. I don't know. Um, Frankly, I think my first sobriety date was in May of 1997. There was a gentleman asking for his mandated, support card to get signed, and I came in from one of those two. So, there's hope for you in this stuff, and I hope you hear something from me that keeps you coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous, and just know that you're welcome and wanted here, regardless. Um, because frankly, we need you. We need you badly. Because like Alcoholics Anonymous has a message of hope that has definitely changed my life and many, many, many of my friends. Um, and I'll get to that here in a second. My home group is the Oregon Statewide Young People's Meeting, and it's been going on for a couple of years. We started it during COVID, and yeah, it's still up and running. Every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific. We hang out for about a half an hour before the meeting. At 8:30, we kick it off. So it's kind of late for the East Coast, but sometimes we get some speakers from out there. We've had speakers from as far away as Australia and Scandinavia, thanks to the advent of Zoom. At any rate, there's some specific lines in the book. I may refer to them. I have a couple books here nearby me, but one of them is we lost the power of choice and drink. And like I'm a special snowflake, and so I have a special circumstance with this one. I didn't get the choice. My mom drank when I was in the womb. Back in the 80s, some doctors had a good idea that you could drink a beer per day, and that was okay. Um, so Um, yeah, I was drinking in the womb. So like a lot of this stuff makes sense, right? But my mom's a normie, so she would drink one beer, right? And like I've I've tried to drink one beer before, and it's not my jam. I don't really understand why people would do that. They don't taste particularly great. I would acquire a taste for some beers over others, and then some liquors over others, and then my story includes drugs too, and I like some drugs more than others too. So like that's just the it's just the nature of this stuff. Um, I grew up in an alcoholic household. My dad's an alcoholic and a drug addict, or was. He recently passed away a couple days before Christmas with 31 years sober. So he was my introduction to 12-step programs. He got sober when I was 12 years old. Um, and so, that's been a long time coming, and I'll hopefully have time to get to that later. But, frankly, I'm just going to talk about the progression. When I was a kid, like I didn't really feel like I fit in. I was a pretty angry kid. Um, I was an only child until I was 5, and then my little brother was born. My mom worked full time. My dad worked at shipyards. And so like like he just wasn't around. He was an alcoholic, so he just like he worked swing shift or whatever. And so my mom was raising my little brother by herself, and I just kind of became his hanger on like all of a sudden, right? So I've since learned that there's like this thing called a fear of abandonment and stuff, and yeah, it's really tough, and it invades my like everyday life. It invades my relationships, both romantic and professional, and all this stuff. It's weird. Thanks to the inventory process, I was able to uncover that and start looking at that and seek professional help too. Um, but I think I tried drinking. Like I would get like sips of wine at dinner and stuff because my mom was a normie. She was like really like she gets sick after like 3 drinks, and like I don't understand that. Um, but frankly, that's fine. Um, I would drink with intention to like feel the effects of alcohol when I was like 12 or 13. I found some of my mom's wine in the basement, and yeah, my buddy and I drank it, and I think we mixed it with orange juice or something because I thought like grape juice and orange juice would work or something, like do something special and make it taste like not like crap. Um, so yeah, that was the first time. And I was very, very afraid of becoming an alcoholic like my father because I was very, very afraid of my father. He was a very angry man. And yeah, it's just it was so weird. But you know, we're not here for Childhood Trauma Anonymous. We're here for Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So um, you know that all that stuff exists. I began smoking pot like in late middle school, and then I would start hanging out with different people. I'd always played baseball, and then in high school, like I just hung out with different kids, and like the jocks and stuff just weren't my crowd anymore, and you know, I wanted to fit in, and I stopped playing baseball, which really sucked because I really enjoyed playing it. I know y'all, like a lot of people don't like baseball; they think it's boring and stuff, but like I played catcher, and I love stealing bases because you got to steal shit, and I like stealing shit. So it was my thing. Um, at any rate, you know, I hung out with the this other crowd, and like we you know, we'd smoke cigarettes at school and stuff, and they just banned smoking at school. Like teachers could still smoke in their cars and stuff, but like they started bringing around these like security guards and stuff, and we'd always like dip out on them and try to run away from them. And it was this cat and mouse game. Um, and so yeah, I started hanging out with progressively like more and more difficult people, and frankly, like I didn't really fit in, and like I would run into like teenage problems, you know, your typical ones. Like this girl likes me, this girl doesn't like me. This guy likes me, this guy doesn't like me, and then like you know all of our hormones are like you know spinning in the blender, and I got into a lot of fights, like a lot of them, and so like I would start getting bullied and stuff, and so I realized there were some kids that weren't getting bullied, and they were in various organizations, right? And so I started hanging out with those kids, and I found my in with them by hanging out with the guy that sold them drugs. I didn't really drink throughout high school. I would sometimes, but again, I was really afraid of ending up like my dad, and so I just like I knew that if I started drinking, that there would potentially be that problem. And you know, frankly, it took a lot of work, and I couldn't get it delivered. Um, you know, I'd have to either A, steal it, B, have somebody's parents buy it for me, you know, or go shoulder tap down at the store. You know, it happened occasionally, but you know, frankly, my whole game was coming up. And like back then, here in Oregon, weed was illegal, so there was profit to be made by selling it. Um, so those were the people I hung out with. And then all of a sudden I had these friends, and like all of a sudden I was getting left alone at school. And like I was still a really angry kid. I got into a lot of fights. Eventually that would catch up with me, um, you know, via assault charges and stuff, and I would find myself incarcerated. Um, and then I'd get let out, you know, I'd do the probation thing, and like they'd always give me more hours than I worked and all the stuff. And it was like the slap on the wrist. Like I never experienced like super bad consequences. And then one day, my friend and I were caught in a house that was being built. We decided to make snow bongs in there, and we got woken up by the police. And now I'm looking at like a burglary charge. And I had this good idea because I have lots of good ideas. And the good idea then was to say, "Oh, I was kicked out of my house. My parents kicked me out." That didn't go over so well. Um, and yeah, so I'd find myself incarcerated again. And this time, like they did a 10-day detention hearing, and I was telling them, "Hey, I'm doing good in the school here, and I got my food handler's card, and I'm playing chess, and I'm good at basketball." And I'm like, you know, look at how good I'm doing. And the judge looked at me, and they're like, "Since you're doing so good in there, why don't you stay in there a while?" And I was like, I thought I was supposed to do good in here and like behave. You know? Like, at any rate, I would find myself getting checked out into a halfway house because my parents couldn't have custody of me. It became a ward of the state, and then I would go back in, and then this would happen throughout my being 16, and then eventually, my mom wiggled it out to put me into rehab. And so I went to rehab and I played the game and like checked the boxes and I'm like, okay, yep, 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 yep. I got to a fourth step in there because they had some kind of semblance of 12-step stuff in there. And I was like, I know all this stuff. I went to a couple meetings with my dad. I know everything, right? And frankly, I hadn't experienced alcohol withdrawal then. I'd experienced very little withdrawal with substances at all at that point. Um, but it was what it was. And then when I got out, I was let out on house arrest, and so I'd go to school and stuff. And luckily, there was no substance provisions on my stuff. Right? Do I only have 5 minutes? I got to get to the solution fast. Man, that sucks. Okay. Um, At any rate, I would smoke pot at lunch with my friends. I had my wisdom teeth taken out. I had eaten all of my Vicodin, so like my mouth hurt, and my probation officer came, and I couldn't speak. My eyes are all bloodshot. I forgot what we were talking about a couple of times, and so I started getting piss tested. I pissed dirty. I was already on probation and house arrest and all this stuff, and so I started getting mandated to go to 12-step meetings. I would get my slip signed. Um, and I started going to meetings on a regular basis, and I started staying clean. I would go to meetings, and not drink or use between meetings. And frankly, that lasted for a little while, and then I got off probation, and then I didn't last much longer, you know, because I didn't have, the legal system being my higher power, So fast forward, I've got an eye on the clock. I got 4 minutes to get to this. Fast forward, I'd come into the meetings. Oh, okay, thank you. Um, so I would run into difficult times. So like a couple of years later, when I was 19, I came back into the rooms and I was butthurt over this girl, and things had escalated significantly in my everything. Right, I already started drinking a lot. I had already started using a lot of drugs. I got really involved in the rave scene, and frankly, it was my whole life. Um, and I stayed sober for a while, went to meetings, didn't use between meetings. I got a sponsor. He had me pray over the toilet to do my third step at a recovery club, and it was disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. But I did it anyway. And then he asked me to write stuff down, you know, and I didn't want to do that. So I got a different sponsor. And you can imagine how that worked out. Fast forward a couple of years, I take a job out of town, and I have to find a place to live. I have to go live with my dad. My dad's got a rule: you can't drink or use when you live at his house. And so I know how to do that. I go to meetings and don't drink or use between meetings, right? And just meeting based sobriety. Um, so that would go on for another 2.5 years. I was starting to stabilize, like saving money, all the stuff. Life got a lot better for me. I lived with a girl for like 4 years, and yeah, like basically my basic needs were met. I could escape life with video games and whatnot, and with my girlfriend at the time. And then I had a good idea to start growing weed in my second bedroom, and then eventually I started smoking it because I have good ideas. Um, and this pattern kind of follows, right? Where once I start using, I can't stop using. And once I stop using, I can't stay stopped. It's the weirdest thing in the world. It's this phenomenon of craving they talk about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And it's in the one of the prefaces called The Doctor's Opinion. And I have this allergy of the body and this obsession of the mind. Like I start thinking about it and I can't stop thinking about it. It's so weird. And then I get myself into all these things and I don't know how I get there. Um, it'll start with a good idea, and then I can't shake the idea. Um, Fast forward from that time, I drank wine with my parents, and I thought I had it licked because I had a couple of years, right? I'm like, fuck, I got this, right? I drank wine with my mom and my stepdad for my birthday, and I had a couple of them. I felt warm and fuzzy, and that was some controlled drinking. I was okay. Like, I got this licked. This is okay. Within 2 weeks, I was driving drunk from a house party at 80 miles an hour, trying to follow my friend. Um, and I was seeing double. I remember seeing double, and I I somehow made it back to his house safely, and that would be the next 8 years. I would drink, and mostly drink because I needed to work, and I didn't want to piss dirty, and I drank a lot. Um, I would I would get pregnant with a woman, and after knowing her for 3 months, and we went all over the Pacific Northwest up to Alaska and back, and just crazy stuff for work, and drinking and driving all the time. Um, and then we would have my first child. Um, I went out to drink the night before my daughter was born, and because I knew that I wouldn't be able to drink very much when she was born because I was going to be a responsible adult. And then I was hung over for her birth. And then after she was born, I had to go out to the bar and celebrate. Like it just went like that. Like I have all these good ideas. Fast forward, I'm drinking on a regular basis. She's pretty cool with it, for the most part, as long as I'm paying bills and like making things happen. So, fast forward, same scenario happens with my son. I got to go out drinking the night before. This is 15 months later. We have, oops, right? Um, and I'm, I go the night before. I'm hungover. I got 5 minutes, right? Okay. I go out drinking the night before. I'm hungover for his birth. I go out drinking that night, and nothing changes, right? I keep drinking. She finally wants to divorce me, and this is a handful of years later, and I can't talk her out of it this time. She's serious. And so what I do is I finally like say, okay, she's gonna go get the kids at the bus stop, and when she gets back here, I'm gonna beg her one more time. And what ended up happening is she said no, so I had a good idea, and I grabbed a firearm out of my garage, and I was gonna blow my head off in the bathroom. And so what ended up happening is the gun fell out of my jacket, right? I didn't rack around or anything, but she thought it was for her, and she runs screaming out of the room, and my son's there, and it's a big fucking mess, right? And like nothing's going my way. I can't fucking control even fucking blowing my head off, right? And she makes a deal with me that she won't call the cops if I leave. And knowing from legal consequences before, a domestic with a firearm is not a good thing, right? So I dip, and I go to my mom's house, and I get drunk with my little brother, because that's how I know how to solve problems, right? And then that night, I couldn't get drunk. It was weird. Um, so the next night I went out, and I got as shit housed as I could because I didn't know how to deal with anything. I have like 3.5 minutes. I need to get to the solution quick, so I'm going to get there. Um, I fell over and split my face open on the toilet that night while I was trying to take a piss. I passed out, blacked out on the. I woke up with my pants around my legs. It was bad. Um, and then I tried drinking again that later that day. I resolved to never drink again that day. But I went out drinking again. I had one beer and I was like, fuck, dude, this is not working out for me. you know, this is all bad. And so I told myself I'm going to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. I started doing 90 and 90. I got a sponsor. Um, and I was talking to him about suicidal rumination. He was a mental health professional. He told me to go to the psychiatric crisis center, so I did. I got out. That sponsor stopped calling me back. I kept bitching and moaning in meetings about all my problems and no solution. Lots of mess, no message. And so another guy came up to me. He's like, "Man, I see you around. Why don't we get into these steps?" And then after about a week of harassing me, I was like, "Okay, let's do that." I would run into YPA at this time, and there's a young people's group here. Um, and I would start doing events, and I would start going around, and I was trying to win back my kid's mom, and it wasn't working. I eventually made my amends to her about 9 months in, and yeah, she wasn't having it. I would continue doing YPA stuff. We took on a state camp out that year. I became chair of that. Um, and for all the headaches, it's not worth the hangovers, right? Like business committee stuff is just it's a headache. It's a lot of work, but the prize is that not only do we stay sober, but we get to show people the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous. We get to have fun doing it. Um, A couple years ago, I had the honor and privilege of being the programs chair for ASIPA, which is the Oregon State Conference. So I got to pick all the speakers. I traveled all over the Western states. I went to Washington. I went to Hawaii. I went to California a couple of times. I spoke in Montana. Um, like I get around, right? And so now I got friends all over the place, like all over the place. Um, this last year, I had the opportunity to be on the host committee for ANYPAA, which is the International Conference of Young People in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was their web chair. Again, I meet more people. Some of those friends I met in Washington, we went on the Alcatraz boat tour together, and we had a little business meeting. We had a little sit down. We're like, hey, there's Swacky Paw, there's Easy Paw, there's Wacky Paw, there's Heartland. There's all these other YPAWs for these regions. We don't have one for the Northwest, so we created it. That's ANYPAA. That's All Northwest Young People of Alcoholics Anonymous. We have a camp out coming up June 7th through June 9th up by Mount St. Helens. If you're familiar with Northwest history, this thing blew up. It's awesome. It's a volcano. Um, yeah, that was the day I learned how to crawl. So sorry about that. But frankly, I do a lot of YPAW stuff. I have an event going on this weekend. We're going to be doing some zip lines and aerial challenge course. Next month, we're going to go skydiving again. We do it every year up here. So yeah, if you want to get down, let me know. I'll get you hooked up. And that's my time. Thanks.